Well, in some of my previous videos, excuse me, I've talked about the classical arguments for the existence of God, the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, the ontological argument, even the axiological argument. Um, and the purpose of these arguments is really just to say that there is a God, not really to say what God is like. So now I thought I would take the next step and describe what God is like. Um, and the when there's something that's true of God, that's what we call an attribute of God. And the traditional attributes that are ascribed to God, and there's others besides these, but these are some of the common ones: um, omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence. God is said to be loving, personal, holy, eternal, just, and immaterial. So that's just kind of a basic list that sometimes people will give of the attributes of God. So what we want to do now is look at why we think God has these attributes. We know that He exists from those arguments. Now we're going to argue that God is like this, that He has these attributes. But before we can really get to that, we have to make sure that the ideas of these attributes are logically possible, that if there is a God, that He could have these particular attributes, and then we'll see why He has those attributes. So uh, first, probably the most controversial of the attributes in this list is omnipotence. Omnipotence means God is all powerful. Um, and there's a famous question: can God make a rock so big that He cannot lift it? Well, and the purpose of that question is to say that the whole idea of omnipotence in the first place is logically self-contradictory. Um, well, to ask the question, can God make a rock so big he can't lift it, is itself logically contradictory. That's where the contradiction is. It's not in omnipotence itself. Uh, Omnipotence is the ability for God to do anything which is logically possible. And of course, He's not going to do something against his nature. If He's holy, He's not going to sin. Um, so, but the basic idea of omnipotence is that God can do that which is logically possible. So it's not logically possible to make a rock um, that an omnipotent being can't lift. Um, to make something more omnipotent than omnipotence. That's self-contradictory. So we don't want to include the self-contradictory in our definition of omnipotence. Um, the yeah, so something which is logically impossible is not a limit on God's power. The power to do all things does not include the power to do no thing. The logically impossible is nothing, it's no thing. There's no such thing as a square circle or a married bachelor. So these ideas are not included under the banner of omnipotence. They're included under the banner of silly, self contradictory nonsense. Um, Now, the second attribute in the list that I gave was omniscience, and sometimes people will say that omnipotence and omniscience are not both possible. If God has all power, He can't have all knowledge, and vice versa. Um, so one way to think about this, uh, of why some people would have a problem with God being both omnipotent and omniscient, is to assume that one or the other is true and then look at why the other one can't be true. So if God is all powerful, then He has the power to do all things, including the power to learn new truths. We have the power to learn new truths as human beings, and God is more powerful than we are. So he would have at least as much power as we have, and we have the power to learn but if God learns, then he's not omniscient. Or if God is omniscient, if he knows all things, then he knows what it's like to fail. But if he knows what it's like to fail, he can't be all-powerful. Well, these kinds of statements are confusing what the idea of omnipotence and omniscience is. God does have all power, but he doesn't have the power to do what's impossible. It's not a limit on God's power to say that he can't learn. He's omniscient and omnipotent at the same time. So if God, for example, God doesn't have the power to swim. He can't swim in the ocean. But that's not a limit on his power, for God is not limited to a physical body, which is required for swimming. So that those are the kinds of things we're assuming that God is limited in some way in order to twist omnipotence and omniscience so that they do contradict. But if we really think about what omnipotence and omniscience is, really, what it's always been held to be in the thought life of the church, of Christianity, they, and I suppose other theistic faiths as well, they really aren't self-contradictory. Another pair of terms that are of attributes that are said to be contradictory with one another is love and justice. How can God love us but also send us to hell, for example? Well, a being can be loving and just. To give somebody a just punishment is different from hating them. In fact, justice presupposes love. If a person is sentenced to time in prison, the judge or the law, we could almost say, has love for the people that we are being protected from this dangerous criminal. And a parent, a loving parent, will give an appropriate punishment to a child. The child deserves to get the punishment, but the parent is giving them the punishment because they love them. So that shows that love and justice are compatible in the same person. So I think that didn't go through each one individually and say it's self-consistent or pairwise consistent, but I think that's enough just to give a kind of a general outline, flavor of the kinds of things that would be present in a more complete presentation. So now in the next video I'm going to say why we think that God has these particular attributes. Again, the list: omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, he's present everywhere; loving, personal, holy, eternal, and just, and immaterial. Thank you.